¿Qué onda, chavos? ¿Cómo están? And welcome to our session, Moving at Lightspeed, how fast-growing companies can propel your engineering career. My name is Arnoldo Montaño, and you might remember me from videos like How to Survive a Zombie Apocalypse or the Mexican Chernobyl. But not many of you know that when I'm not making YouTube videos, I work as a software developer on a fast-growing company called EasyKnock. I learned how to develop video games with a program called RPG Maker in junior high, and from there I jumped to develop web applications and to work with international companies. But enough talking about me, because today I share the stage with Vicente Plata, a man that many developers look for answers. He's currently the VP of Engineering in Runway Health, but prior to that, he was also a tech lead and manager at Shopify and lead engineering in Hims and Hers, and he should grow a fancy mustache and move to a mountain to better reflect the role of sage he plays in the dev community. So thank you, Vicente, for being here. How are you?
No, thank you, Arnoldo. I'm doing great. Always happy to share stage with you. I love your intro, so thank you very much for that, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. So, okay, the fancy word of these days is hypergrowth. Every company likes to say they are in a hypergrowth stage. But what is hypergrowth exactly? It sounds like a Pokemon move, so not everyone knows what it means. How can you define it?
Yeah, I mean, it is tricky, right? So if you want to get very technical, and since most folks here, I guess, are technical, it is when you have a 40% growth year over year. And generally speaking, you can use many metrics. The most common one is the CAGR, which is TLDR. If you put $1,000 in a company, does it grow to by 40% next year or something like that? No, people get hacky every now and then. Wink, wink, we crash, for example. And you can say, okay, depending on this, maybe it is about hiring, or it's about revenue, or it's about earnings. Or so, but I mean, as long as you're doing a 40% growth year over year, depending on the
In
dimension, you
anything,
can say
yeah.
that it's hyper growth, quote unquote, right?
Yeah. Okay, that sounds great. Lots of numbers and acronyms and letters and stuff. But what it really means for us engineers to be in a hyper growth company, what will change when you get to work in a hyper growing company?
Dude, I mean, imagine that. Like, even if you're not growing by 40% year over year, which it
Yeah.
can be even more. Like, I remember at Hims and Hers, we started down with like 7 full-time engineers, ended up being when I left, I don't know, 70 probably or something like that. So, but
Okay.
even if you're growing less than that, you're going to grow by a lot, and the business is
Yeah.
going to change. Because when you start growing, like, you see how different things come through. For example, last week, I realized that the way you handle health spending accounts and FSAs in the States is
Yeah.
different than how you handle like regular credit cards or even prepaid credit cards. So you're gonna be ready. If you're gonna grow by 40% year over year, you're gonna be super ready to like get those kind of challenges. What did you have to do? Documenting, for example, being perhaps a little bit more lean on the code itself, and
Yeah.
try to move and try to experiment like as fast as possible, right?
Yeah. So now that you're talking about lean and deciding what to do first, how do you manage, like, or how do you decide what things to do, what things to put to the side when you are developing a product in a world that is changing so fast that you need to move quickly and deliver something to the users? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so what I found is that you can have two layers of software, so to speak. So
Yeah.
the layer on front, the logical speaking, it's not the front end, but a layer on top of it with Google Optimize or whatever, allows you to test and allows you to validate assumptions very, very quickly, even if hackishly at times. But you
Yeah.
cannot let that acquisition of tech debt fall all the way to the core of the product, right? So the
Yeah.
core of the product, it has like a more structured process maybe, but then on top of it, you put something that, again, it can be Google optimized, it can be with a lot of feature flags, it can be with whatever that allows you to test, experiment, and validate as soon as possible without like messing with the nuances of a fully fledged engineering system, right?
Yeah, you need to move fast, definitely. And well, for example, when you are in the first steps of building a product, obviously there will be a little understaffed, if you may say. So you will need to be able to do multiple jobs, wear multiple hats, and be able to, like you said, make documentation and stuff. So how do you motivate people or encourage people to do this exact same thing, to wear multiple hats?
I mean, from the get-go, you kind of like get an idea of whether people feel comfortable switching between parts of the stack or even between disciplines and technologies, right? It is perfectly fair if you feel more comfortable or if you have more experience with, I don't know, front end, or if you have more experience doing DBA or whatever. But you got to be willing to do even product stuff or quality stuff required,
Yeah,
right? So that's a big point and a big yellow flag in interviews. Sometimes it's not that the person is not a good developer or a good engineer, but rather that given the stage of the company, hypergrowth in this case, he or she, they're probably more happy, they're probably happier like staying with a particular role or with a particular and very
yeah.
strict set of tasks or responsibilities. That's perfectly fair. It's just a matter of, well, perhaps not the best place to be, right?
Yeah, you need to be like very used to talk to product people, to product managers, to like understand the needs of the business and that kind of stuff. So I think that is one key difference with like startups and in like full grown companies. What do you find different to work in these full-fledged companies, these giant monsters of the tech industry versus hyper growing company?
Yeah, in big like corps, you generally have like a high level of redundancy, which means that it is unlikely that you're going to make big mistakes. But at the same time, it's gonna take longer to ship stuff. I remember when I left Microsoft Buddha, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, perhaps a bit more. I'm a bit too old to remember, but perhaps a little bit more. The stuff that I wrote at the end, it saw the light maybe 6 months later, even though it was completely done. So
Yeah.
imagine like I saw it popping up and I was like, oh wait, I worked on this and it barely made it, right? So those kind of feelings. Whereas at hypergrowth companies, chances are like you're gonna have a lot of a very strong, hopefully continuous integration and continuous delivery and deployment pipeline.
Yeah.
The moment that you merge something, it's hopefully gonna make it, and perhaps you can deploy several times a day, even on Friday, like God forbid, right?
Yeah. For example, at EasyKnock, we have like these 2 week sprints. So at the end of these 2 weeks, we always have something to deploy. So the work that we did through this sprint, we always get to see it deployed in, yeah, delivered to the user. So yeah, this is one cool feature that working at hypergrow companies, that you always see the your work there. Yeah.
No, totally, totally. Yeah, and how do you find though, like this balance between quality but also agility and speed and deployment?
You need to find the sweet spot, because yeah, as you said, the business needs to grow and to deliver things fast. So you need to take decisions to what to put aside, or to deliver smaller features, to ensure that your code and the product is going to be well developed, well maintained, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, you need to take decisions fast in this world. Another question that I wanted to ask, another difference in these big tech companies versus these startups is the shares, the equity. So as I know, Hims and Hers made the jump to a smaller startup to be in the stock market. So can you explain to us what equity works, or how do you expect to have equity as a compensation?
Yeah, so the cool thing about equity, I mean, obviously it's part of your compensation package, but the cool
Yeah,
thing what I found is that it actually changes your mindset and how do you approach your work. So when I worked at Microsoft or even at Shopify to an extent, you know that what you do can influence a little bit your compensation in terms of bonuses and all that, but not at the same exponential level, right? It will not give the
yeah,
same visibility as if you did something at Hims and Hers where we worked at with COVID tests, like I think the first or second company to distribute COVID tests via mail, or with services in Spanish, or by expanding that like the offering overall mental health, what have you. You actually saw the valuation like being impacted by this sometimes, and I think it's a joke with Twitter folks lately, like perhaps the other way around, like
yeah.
the cooler work you did, the further down it go, right? But well, I mean, at least you feel like you have an impact. You see your work being more covered, and you get like more feedback from people. Now you start thinking about actually owning part, even if it's a small part, but owning part of the company, right?
Yeah.
And you start to think, okay, how can I later optimize for optionality and like make probably a portfolio for myself, or like be actually invested at an equity slash ownership level, have like more skin in the game and be more exposed and have bigger incurring bigger risk. Why not, right? So that, I mean, without necessarily ignoring or discarding the compensation part of equity at Hims and Hers in particular. But if
Yeah.
you ask me, the value of learning about equity and how to play with it and how to actually influence startups, that definitely like skyrocketed, I think, the way I think about like financial stuff, right? Or maybe even startups and consulting and advising. That was amazing. And the reason why I point this out is because I think I was very fortunate with Hints and Hers. And what I don't want is for people to start feeling like, oh, things didn't work out at my startup or at the startup that I worked at with Terminal. So it's all a scam, right? I mean, you got to be clear that the actual having that level of uptake, you're gonna be lucky, and you're gonna be. I was fortunate enough to have this amazing group of people, right? But the mindset
So
shift that you get, that's very very valuable.
are you saying that you can't become a millionaire with equity? Yeah, that's what you're saying.
Since I'm in my home country right now, I ain't gonna admit or deny that. Yeah,
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Okay.
it can be like a considerable uptick. Yeah.
Yeah. In well, talking about differences between companies, what would you find a big difference between like working in nearshore companies from here in Mexico versus working at companies like Terminal that we can work more closely to the clients? What's the main difference that you find?
So in Mexico, like in nearshore agencies or whatever outsourcing companies, I think the success of a hyper growth company generally translated best case scenario in having more peers, right, working with you. And
Yeah.
like sometimes it wasn't even that. It was like just you're just a number, and I mean, no matter what how you see it on, you're just like a they're getting a slice of your services, right? So there was not like a big impact on the success of a company in hypergrowth. Whereas working directly, what you do with Terminal right now, there is like a potential for uptake, and that can be in terms of obviously like money if you get equity or if you get a bonus, or it can also be in the fact that we can hire more people now internally, so you're probably gonna have more vacation time, or you're probably gonna have like more training, or you're probably gonna have like so that because and I think that the previous video was talking about it, because you have a direct relationship with the company, you
Yeah.
have way more leeway and you have way more leverage to negotiate stuff, right? And if you're like on a growth stage, or if the company's on a growth stage, the negotiations can be more juicy, can be more beefy, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And well, in Hims and Hers, you did a manager role. So, talking in the side of the client, you got the opportunity to hire a lot of people. So, how do you find like the nearshoring versus these companies like Terminal? And how do you find delegating the responsibilities to these developers that are like so far away? Is it easy for you to manage people that is not in your same location?
I think you get used to it, but I mean, if we were all in the same location, I wouldn't be happy either, right? Like, I wouldn't be able to like be from one place to the other, or you'd have to, I know, share a bathroom, or the stinky tuna sandwich in the at lunchtime, and all that. So that, I
Yeah.
mean, to be honest, that's one of the main reasons. I'm like a very sensitive smell person, so that's one of the main reasons why I don't go back to the office, right? So. But I mean, if you're going to be remote, then it's understandable that your team is going to be remote, and they're going to have a remote or a telecommuting mentality. It is
Yeah.
not easy. Like, there are a lot of things that you got to change. The way you communicate, it has to be like way more structured. Even if it's online, even if it's like with a video call, you actually going to know what you're going to say in advance, right? And when you create a bug, like it is very bothersome, at least for me. It is very bothersome when people go like, "Do you have 5 minutes or whatever?" And you have to jump on an impromptu call because I mean you're probably I don't know making some coffee or whatever, and then you have to like stop it and turn on Zoom and what have you, right? So you're
Yeah.
gonna be very structured in how you create like your bug reports and how you set expectations, and because you do not have these frequent feedback loops, you probably have like a weekly one-on-one and maybe every other day like an informal chat or whatever, but you're going to be very clear into how people are performing from your perspective, and you're going to be very structured with the feedback loops and with the 360s and whatever, right? So it adds a lot of uncertainty if you don't do it well. And I mean, I'm pretty sure I made a lot of mistakes when I started. I'm probably still doing it. But
Yeah.
if you don't do it well, people may not be having like the best performance, and they do not learn until it's like almost too late until they get their PIP or whatever, right? So PIP is a performance improvement plan, and generally is what we do in order to save people from like being yeah firing them or whatever, right? You're going to do a performance improvement plan if you're ethical about hey, this is what's going wrong, this is what I expect from you, and if you do not meet this, then yeah, bye bye. So sometimes if you don't want to get all the way to that stage, you're going to be very proactive, and doing it
Yeah.
remotely is particularly challenging, right?
Yeah, I think that communication is like your best tool to work remotely. You need to communicate efficiently. You need to communicate regularly with your client, with your team. Yeah, to like be present, not being in the same physical location that your client is. So for the people that is not used to work remotely, what are like three key points that they need to start doing to like dip their toes in this world?
Yeah, I think getting better at writing, at written communication in particular,
Yeah,
it is point number one. I mean, your English does not have to be perfect, and I mentioned that because I was looking at the comments in the stream.
yeah,
So your English does not have to be perfect, but it has to be understandable. And I think we all understand. You may have hiccups here and there. Like even I sometimes I listen to myself and I'm like, what the heck am I saying? So, but I mean, you do not have to be perfect, but
yeah,
it's going to be relatively easy and straightforward to understand, right? You're gonna be very like clear with your time. So, for example, right now I'm working out early in the morning and then late at night, and that's perfectly fair. But we all have like a very clear overview of when am I gonna be joining meetings, of when I'm gonna be working, and when I'm working, like I'm working, right? Like, literally, I just locked my door because my mom was like, "Hey, what are you doing? Get on the computer." And I'm like, dude, mom, no, I mean, stop it, right? So be very clear, very strict, and sometimes a little bit harsh, like
yeah,
with people around you, even, and looking after yourself. So something I struggle with is if I'm working remotely, which is most of the times, maybe I forget to like stand up, walk a little bit, go around the parking lot. You cannot do that to yourself. Obviously, there is like a health part to it, like a physical health part to it, but there's also the mental health aspect of, you know what, just being away of the computer for maybe even an hour a day. That's just about it. Walking, going to nature, maybe a mall, whatever. Just setting your mind free for a little bit so that you can come back more creative and more energized. Right. Those would be my top three tips. If you're gonna get technical, get an Ethernet cable, like for God's sake. I
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know, like if you're making all this like a good income and all that, why don't you set up like some infra with a proper cable and all that? Yeah, I mean Wi-Fi is gonna work, but it's not gonna be as reliable, right? So that'd be like a bonus, like a little sprinkle on top. Yeah.
Yeah, your family watching Netflix and then you're trying to jump in
Yes.
a call and yeah, you get laggy and stuff. Yeah.
It's just a matter of prioritizing work, right? I mean, it's
Yes,
not like it's
of
it's
course.
it's everything that you are going to use your network for, because yeah, again, you got kids or maybe your nephew or whatever, but work is like priority number one, right? So just
Yeah.
get a cable, please.
Yeah, and in about talking like the day-to-day work, what an engineer can expect when working in a hyper-growing company. I feel that like the day-to-day work is different between large-scale companies and hyper-growing companies. Can you talk more about this?
Well, I generally like to give like a status updates with Dailybot, for example, and I try to be like very clear about what I'm going to work on that day. But the fact is, when you're on a hyper growth company, that is just a guide. That is just a reminder of what you did yesterday, to be honest, because you never know for a fact what you're going to be working on today. So
Yeah,
I thought I was going to be fixing some bugs for case creation, for example, at Runway with some particular medications yesterday. And I ended up fixing photo upload and adding a lot of amplitude signals because we were wondering if it was like a drop rate, right? After analyzing the funnel. So like, I don't know, and you're gonna be okay with it. I mean, sometimes people are like, oh no, I want to know what I'm gonna do for the rest of the week and have my clear deliverables and all that.
Yeah.
Dude, I'd love it if you could create like hyper growth companies with that level of structure. To this day, I'm not sure you can. I don't think you can. You're gonna be like completely willing to do whatever has to get done. Now, obviously, you gotta expect and you gotta be vocal about expecting like a similar level of how do you call it, reward or whatever. Like generally speaking, like be it equity or bonuses or like ownership or whatever. But you're going to be doing whatever has to be done that day in particular, right? So yes, you
Yeah.
have structure. In my case, for example, doing a little bit more management, I know that I have like a lot of meetings on Monday and a few on Tuesday and maybe Wednesday I'm mostly free and all. So you have a that's the level of a structure that you have. But I don't know if I'm going to be hiring today, or maybe if I'm going to be like doing some regulatory stuff, or if I'm going to be like chatting with investors or whatever, right? And same thing for like engineers. Are you going to be doing backend today? Are you going to be
Yeah.
researching React, or are you going to be integrating this thing? I don't know what you think if you've experienced anything like that.
No, sometimes you need to create your own work because I mean, in this fast world, maybe PMs don't have all the answers all the time. So you need to have like a scope of the product that you are building, and then you need to have like the sense to jump and work on some stuff that is not like clearly defined yet. So you need to find a way. You need to talk to the right people to know what you are what you're needed to do. So yeah, you need to be very very proactive in this world to do a better job. Yeah, definitely.
And again, it's not for everyone. Like, it's not that if you want to, like, sit and do TDD all day and with like a big, I don't know, specs and whatever, it's not that you are wrong. It's not that what you're trying to do is not the right way to write software. It is perfectly fair and valid. It's just that maybe this are not exactly the best place. This is when you want to learn a lot about the business, about technology, and about whatever comes your way, and actually have
Yeah.
an impact, make a difference, and take that with you on your next adventure, even maybe.
Yeah, and for example, we will talk a lot about how the technology is growing rapidly and stuff. But how about the scalability of the projects? When you work at Shopify, you needed to take into account how the business will grow in the future. So how do you manage that? How do you plan for the future?
To be honest, like that amount of planning, I don't think it's something that you can do easily, because sometimes you're very positive or you're very optimist and you go like, hey, we're gonna have hundreds of thousands of users, like and you end up getting like, I don't know, dripping or like, yeah, just a couple of them, right? And then you'll go like, well, I don't think this is gonna be big because we're gonna start with a small segment or with a small cohort, and
Yeah.
it turns out that it actually draws people. But generally speaking, what I try to do, and that's why, so people are looking right now at Twitter Blue, for example, and they go like, why isn't it available more widely? Or looking at what is this thing that came out today, the circles, I think, right? Like close
Yeah.
friends for Twitter. And they're like, why is it being rolled out slowly? Well, generally it's because of that. Because you get an idea of how people are probably gonna use or are gonna stress the system, but you gotta like you gotta like turn on the water, so to speak. You gotta open the faucet like little by little, right?
Yeah.
And that way you kind of get an idea, you know what, I need to throw more money, I need to throw more hardware, or I need to sit back, I need to sit down, and I need to think back about whether I'm using like the best algorithm or the best data structures. Sometimes that's why we joke about like you're never going to use algorithms and the data structures that you get interviewed at.
Yeah.
Chances are, yes, you're going to use them, but it's unlikely that you're going to have to think about them from the get-go. You need to
Yeah.
get like an understanding of them, just in case that as you start opening up the faucet, you realize that the system does not scale. And sometimes it does not scale because of a human factor, right? So you're gonna be always like always hiring and always getting resumes and all that. That's why you're gonna see like everyone having a careers page. Well, almost everyone. Like I don't have one yet, but I'll create it. Even if they're not actively hiring, but you know that at any moment you need to hire super quickly. You need to scale super quickly, like
Yes.
from an HR perspective, and you got to be ready for it. So yeah, you got to be ready. You got to move slowly, but be able to react as quickly as possible.
It happens a lot when they release new video games and the servers are not ready for all
Yes.
the people that is expecting to play. So yeah, yeah, I know it perfectly. So I want to talk about how we people from Latin America or countries that are not like much tech savvy, how can we like present ourselves to the companies? How can we like structure our experience to make a good impression to the hiring people, to the companies, to have a better opportunity to land a job at a company like Terminal?
I love the region, and I love Latin America, like evidently. But the fact of the matter is that we tend to be a little bit risk averse, for example. And if you let that risk aversion show during your interviews, it's gonna be a little bit hard to to get or to land some of the jobs. So I think Terminal is doing a great job at sharing articles and sharing like stuff on their blog and all that, like to make you a little bit less risk averse, or to like make you aware of what the best practices are for showing that you're ready for the risk and for the reward, obviously, right? So my recommendation would be like, stop. If you want to land a job like this, stop thinking about like the typical godin that we call it, right? Like the typical nine to
Yeah.
five job and all that. Start thinking about in terms of how you can impact the business. And that should, like, it's not about burning yourself out. Like that can be unlimited vacation or taking a couple of hours throughout the day or whatever works for you. But how are you going to impact the business, and how are you going to contribute to this hyper growth stage? Technical stuff matters, but honestly, I trust that you're going to be able to like understand and learn it very, very quickly, particularly if you're a seasoned engineer already. It's more about your attitude, and if you're actually willing to commit to the mutual success of like a relationship, right?
Yeah, I feel like the hard skills only takes you to a certain level, but when you become like a senior engineer is when you develop certain soft skills that are required in this type of business that are the company is growing so fast that you need to be able to wear multiple hats. So yeah, you need to improve all these skills as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely, man.
Yeah, well, I think we have a few minutes left. I just want to thank you, Vicente, for this talk. Always a pleasure talking with you. I don't know if you have anything left to say.
I mean, as usual, I just want you to know that we're all like rooting for you. We know that you can land whatever job you're willing to land. I think if you go to like app.terminal.io, you're gonna find some very cool stuff there. Like I worked at Terminal for a while, and I know that you're happy as well here. So it's definitely a good place to be. Feel free to reach out via Twitter or whatever. More than happy to like continue conversation.
Yeah, Vicente is like the Yoda for our developers. Yeah, so yeah, contact him. And well, thank you everyone, and stay tuned for the next session for the live audience Q&A. Use the force within you to land a role at a high growth company, where you can ask your questions about landing any kind of roles we just talked about today. And the session will be starting in a few minutes after a short break. And as always,
So.
ah, may the force be with you. Thanks.